That was Space Station number 5 by a band called Montrose from their self-titled album from '73. A gentleman named Sammy Hagar went on to become who he became, the Red Rocker. I'm not sure if that makes him a communist. Not sure it matters, but a great song and probably my favorite Sammy song. My name is Jason. This is episode 6, Hexes and Soldiers. So I officially have a 6-pack of episodes, and that is, well, somewhat cause for celebration. Still going strong. Plan to keep going on. And what else? It's freezing outside, and I think most of continental U.S. is dealing with some sort of cold factor. 21 degrees right now. We received a light dusting of snow just a day ago. Not much, just enough to make it look beautiful. But it is freezing, and I was on Facebook not too long ago, and, well, people post stupid, ridiculous, useless stuff, and I read it. And one of those things was, it's cold outside when you go outside and it's cold. And that holds true for this scenario. Definitely cold outside. And Jesus, I hate to keep running the furnace nonstop, but you got to be warm, right? And damn furnace just blows dry, dusty air around, so my sinuses are just deplorable. Either way, what's new? What's new is the shout-outs, because in this episode, and I'm going to ask you to bear with me, I am going to give a shout-out to all my subscribers. That's right, every single one of you. So here I go. Derek M., Anthony Salvaggio, Kevin Smith, Nathan Scott, Gary Van Zant, Tony Ziptube, Terry McShue, Marcello Zini, Shane Brewer, Tinker Shuffle, Nick Aftages, Itinerant Hobbyist, Michael Sundberg, Jason Young, Samir Abdin, Jay Doyle, Rex Gator, Cthulhu the Old, Todd Nelson, Transplatin, John Mag, and the 10 mystery subscribers who wish to remain anonymous. And finally, each and every one of you who has listened to this show and is not a subscriber, a big, gigantic thank you to each and all of you. It is much appreciated, because without you, well, what exactly is the point of doing this thing and posting it? Not much. Again, thanks to each and every one of you. Moving right along, the Blues have decided that they don't wish to play hockey anymore, at least hockey worth watching. Having problems, especially in the first period. But, they'll be back on track eventually. Still no job. I have heard back from the hospital regarding what do they call it? Environmental services technician? Which, isn't that just a fancy way of saying you're going to clean bedpans? I hope not, but I got a feeling that's what it is. But doesn't matter, need a job. And I also heard from a gas station, but it's a gas station. And nice to know that that option's there, but definitely not jumping at the opportunity. And if you had asked me as a kid what I want to be when I grow up, a hospital environmental technician and or gas station attendant would not have been very high on the list. But got to pay bills and got to do something. So hopefully something pans out for me. Regarding new releases and pre-orders, it is dry as a bone. And well, you can't constantly pump out stuff, so I understand that. But as far as this week goes, there is little to nothing uh, worth mentioning in regards to new releases or pre-orders. At least that I haven't already mentioned in previous shows. Now that may change. Hopefully it will in the next week or two. But as far as that segment of the show, which is intended to be a major part of the show, nothing to report. So that can also give you time to take stock of what you got. Maybe dust off some old games that you have intended to play but yet to do so, and fall in love with something that you have owned for millennia, and just step back and take inventory and appreciate what you got. 6.2, Kharkov 42, the failed offensive. The Case Blue scenario I've been playing is coming along nicely. Finished setting that up and went through a turn or two. The lines are holding up relatively well, although the Germans did punch a hole in the south, which was quickly plugged with Russian reserves. And the Russians pushed the Germans out of a key victory city. Were not able to move into that city, but yeah, and then the Germans just moved right back in. So, hot potato with that victory city. And a couple other little things going on. But it's interesting because you can get a sense of where major things are going to open up and start developing. And got regarding those Russian reserves, I typically forget or ignore anything to do with reserves. But this was one instance where having reserves worked out really well and plugged that hole right up with Russians. So we'll keep you posted on that. And maybe I'll put some pictures up regarding that scenario somewhere. I don't know. We'll see. Shenandoah Studio, and please forgive me. I keep resorting back to them. This is supposed to be about board games they produced. I don't want to call them video games, but games for the iPad and games for the iPhone. But I do go back to them because the people that are doing this stuff are old school board game designers. And when they come up with a new game, the way they do it is through the production of a board game first before they go to the any software aspects. But the interesting thing I came across, and my brother alerted me to this, was these two interns, okay? We'll call this the two interns. These two interns volunteer their time, I think it's roughly a week, to Shenandoah Studio. I don't know how they find each other, but they do. The one intern has played Risk, which is the extent of his wargaming background. The other intern has designs on something musically related in the music business. So I'm going to assume he's probably played nothing when it comes to war games. But anyway, these two guys sit down, start play testing Shenandoah Studios' new game, Gettysburg. And there's an interview that you can read about this. I guess if you go to the Shenandoah Studio site. But they admit that after the first few hours, they realize they're playing it wrong, have to go back, reread the rules. And one guy explains how he is unaccustomed to games with rules that are this in-depth and demanding. And but they bang out some playing time regarding this yet-to-be-released game. And it's just interesting and somewhat entertaining to read about. And I'm going to assume that Shenandoah Studio wanted two people that knew nothing about war games, maybe to test that area, that target audience, people who haven't played war games, who are new to it, how they would fare playing a war game, or they just had no idea and got stuck with these two guys who knew nothing about war games, and breaks my heart because I know there's plenty of you out there, and myself included, that perhaps might be a bit more qualified than these two guys when it comes to play testing. And my lord, to be able to play test a game that is going to be released for mass consumption would definitely be something. Well, I have that on my bucket list, and yet to do it, so some jealousy there. I guess this is the part of the show where I continue to whine about guns, dice, and butter. 3 months now, no new show. The doctor, who is the gentleman who has designed Triumph of Chaos, puts this podcast on, and yeah, it's been 3 months. So I don't know if the man has been incarcerated or hospitalized or is on the lam or what, but man, he does it monthly. And well, the last one was 3 months ago. So that basically sucks because that is, as I've said in the past, my favorite podcast, and I guess I'll just have to keep waiting. So the meat of this show will be about the Battle of the Bulge, and that coincides nicely with dates and things because the anniversary of that is coming up on the 16th. I know the Pearl Harbor anniversary just passed, and probably a more timely show would deal with the Pearl Harbor experience and how games treat that in the Pacific Theater, but I didn't. I wanted to do something on the Bulge. It's cold out, there's snow out. I feel like I can relate to the weather when it comes to that battle, and so that's what I focused on. And I've done so by compiling the top 10 Battle of the Bulge games, and this is according to The Geek, and that, of course, being Board Game Geek. And I'll start at the bottom and work my way up the ladder. But number 10 is Wakcham Rhine, and number of editions, but specifically the SPI 77 edition. And I have on order, interestingly enough, the 2005 Decision Games edition. Additionally, there is a newer Decision Games treatment of this game. Now, the problem is, all over the place, people are crying and screaming about, at least with the 2005 Decision Games edition, errata, just a ton of errata that exists regarding this edition, and the non-existent structure when it comes to the rules. But I picked this edition because I am superficial when it comes to certain aspects of wargaming, and well, this had the most beautiful map when it comes to these editions and or any Bulge game there is. And if this edition's rulebook is strewn with holes and problems, well, just take the rulebook from the newer edition and use that, which is what I've done. I've downloaded the newest edition's rulebook and printed it out. So I'm going to tackle this thing and see what I think and report back to you. And what else? Number 9 is Avalon Hill's Bitter Woods, an older game. MMP released an expansion for this, and I have both of these. Of course, L2 came out with the definitive treatment of Bitter Woods, and have read many wonderful things regarding the L2 edition. Just the sheer overall beauty and love that was that this game has, and the L2 edition, I assume, at some point before I die, will be on one of my shelves, but it isn't yet. Um, Number 8, Ardennes by the Gamers, which is a standard combat series. I don't own it. Don't know much about it, but based on the Gamers and what they've done and the things that I have played, I can only assume it is yet another solid game. Number 7, and this is kind of interesting, is Axis and Allies did a treatment of the Bulge, and that's Avalon Hill slash Hasbro. But Axis and Allies has done their version of the Bulge, and I own it, have played it, and would recommend that. It's an interesting little game. It's not obviously overly done or blown out regarding size and scope and the rules. It's something that you could learn and play in an afternoon, and would recommend anybody do that. Number 5, Panzer Grenadier Elsenborn Ridge by Avalanche Press. And I don't know what it is about Avalanche Press that scares me. I can only assume it's the things that I've read and the things that I've heard. But there's something about Avalanche Press that isn't clicking when it comes to games. Maybe there's something out there that I'm yet to play, and if I played it, I would change my tune. But as of yet, I'm just reluctant to do anything that Avalanche Press puts out. Anyway, they did Elsenborn Ridge, which I believe is the northern shoulder of that battle. And I don't know, maybe somebody's played it and loves it. If you have, let us know. I don't know much about it, and I'm going to tiptoe around it to number 4, Iron Tide, Panzers in the Ardennes, Pacific Rim Publishing. Supposed to be a pretty good game. I don't have it. I don't know much about it. Again, maybe somebody can let us know who has played it. Number 3, Bastogne, Screaming Eagles, Under Siege, standard combat series by M&P. A game I own and have enjoyed and would definitely recommend that. Obviously, doesn't cover the whole battle, merely the Bastogne part of it. And when I say merely, that is not to say that it is not adequately attended to in sufficient detail and attention. And then number 2, Fast Action Battle Series by GMT. Their treatment of the Bulge, and I've looked at this thing a number of times and ran screaming. A block game for the Bulge, yeah, I don't know. But then something clicked, and I looked at it again, and I thought there might be something here. This could be a gem, a diamond in the rough. So on order goes GMT's Fast Action Battle Bulge game. And number 1 is GMT again with their game Ardennes 44. And later on in the show, this is the game that I will go into and dissect and lay all the bits and pieces out for you to let you know what you're in for. So, honorable mention, you have to give credit to GMT again, Tigers in the Mist, which would, if you were to rank this, it would come in at number 12, actually, among Bulge games. But Tigers in the Mist has proven to be great when it comes to tournament play, and I think there have been some game conventions that still have this game up for play. Also, Avalon Hill's 1981 Battle of the Bulge game, which I have played and thoroughly enjoyed. That would also, if you were to rank it, come in at 13. And then the Cells game by Revolution Games, which I went into on another show, and I also have that on order, would rank 17th. But again, a game that is just Small, compact, but looks like packs a lot of punch, and can't wait to get that thing on the table. Also, Avalon Hill has their ASL stuff when it comes to the bulge, and you've got uh, two different games for ASL when it comes to the bulge, and I think the second one is a little more revered by ASL aficionados. I don't have it. It's pricey, it's hard to find, and again, not to sound superficial, and I'm sure there are a ton of you out there that will say these are some of the most beautiful maps you have ever seen, but I wholly disagree. These maps are atrocious, and to think that something better couldn't have been presented is hard for me to understand, but perhaps I should just take pause and appreciate that there is a bulge treatment for ASL and leave it at that. So, of course, you can't go into any bulge game without going into the history, and I have done that. Not in depth. I can't obviously cover everything for time purposes and because most of you guys, if not all of you, know about this. It's old hat for you. But I will go into some of the key things and take it from there. December 16th, 1944 is the official start of Wargame Rhine. And the German objective here was there's a bulge, okay, pushed inward in the Allied lines in the area of the Ardennes. And the Germans want to exploit this, push it even further, and drive all the way to Antwerp. In the process, separate the U.S. and the British, perhaps cause a bunch of political turmoil between the two because you got Eisenhower, who was getting at this point thoroughly tired of Montgomery, and then later on, of course, Patton will factor into this. Hitler's aware of this, and he hopes that not only geographically but politically he can cause a rift, and that would only work to his advantage. It is in this specific area along the Ardennes that the green and extremely worn out and tired troops are sent to rest and get their feet wet when it comes to the war. Not much going on. In fact, the Allies refer to this area as the Ghost Front because there is just nothing going on. So, why the initial success? I mean, right off the bat, it seems like the Germans are just steamrolling through, and they're going to do it. They're going to pull this off, and the Allies are caught completely off guard. They're everything's in a complete disarray. It seems like it's going to work, but at least initially, what is the cause for this success? Well, there's a number of things, but focus first on the name itself, Wargame Rhine, which literally means watch on the Rhine, and it is meant as a deception. Okay, the Germans are aware the Allies are paying attention to certain things, and they want to present this area of the front as a defensive area. The Germans are just going to sit back, they're going to keep an eye on things, and that's that. And the Allies really don't have a reason to believe that there is here or anywhere going to be a major German offensive. The Germans are perceived as pretty much spent, and yeah, the Allies are just hanging out for the winter, and they're going to resume their big offensive in the spring and roll into Germany and be done. That's the way everything is, at least read. But the Germans got other plans, and when the German generals are briefed regarding the offensive, Hitler, in an effort to ensure that there's no leaks, more or less inadvertently threatens not only the lives of the commanders, but the lives of their families as well. Because, at this point, Hitler doesn't trust any of the commanders. An attempt on his life has occurred. He survives, which unfortunately he defines as he's been given divine providence. He's been spared, and so anything that he does is perhaps driven by a divine hand. And yeah, he screwed up. But anyway, as far as threatening your commanders and their families, that can be pretty effective in keeping lips sealed, and it proves overall effective. Though the Allies do find snippets and things, they've been decrypting the ultra code messages for some time. You got Bletchley Park, the British reading things, and also since 1940, the Allies have been decrypting communiques from the Japanese ambassador, and these are known as purple. And these purple communiques, if you go back in the records, this Japanese ambassador, believe it or not, actually revealed that there was going to be a major offensive, and he even talks about specific forces and groups that would make up that invasion, and sugar, which is code word for SS, and this and that, and the makeup of it. But in the end, the Allies never take it seriously. They just don't believe it. They're overly confident, and they think the Germans are done. So they don't pay attention. And so overconfidence and an overall focus on, in fact, a day into the offensive, the Allies still refuse to believe that this thing's taken place. And you hear stories of this one guy who was a veteran. He's still alive. He talks about hearing engines, because the tanks and trucks, and they're all gearing up for it. And he says, he contacts his superiors and he says, hey, what's going on? I can hear the stuff. Something's happening. And he says that it was, if it wasn't Division Corps, it was at least Division that tells him they're playing phonographs of engines to throw you off. And apparently the Germans had done this in the past, and this wasn't anything new. But the guy knew better, and he thought, what the hell are you talking about? But this just goes to show that the Allies, to say they don't expect the Germans to do anything is an understatement. They're banking on it. And so the Allies are overconfident. They don't expect anything. You got the weather. And now when this thing kicked off, it's common knowledge that the weather was bad, right? Well, as it turns out, this had little to do with luck or coincidence. Hitler had been planning this offensive for months, since, October. And he didn't actually set the date until he was satisfied that bad weather was rolling in. And at this time, meteorology was still relatively in its infancy. Nothing like you got today. But in order to determine what the weather would be like, he actually had U-boats stationed in the North Atlantic send weather reports, because he knew the bad weather in that area meant bad weather in the Ardennes in a matter of 2 or 3 days time. So when he gets a satisfactory bad weather report from the North Atlantic, he sets the wheels in motion, and he's able to predetermine inclement weather in advance and plan accordingly. And of course, bad weather is good for the Germans, because then the Allies can't get their planes up and do air reconnaissance or any kind of air response with fog and mist and clouds and whatnot. So when this happens, the Germans start. And on December 16th, everything goes into motion. And it wasn't only the shock and surprise, which there was a ton of that, as Allies hadn't expected anything like it. But yeah, there was this overcast fog and general bad weather that adds to the confusion and chaos. And there's a number of people, when you read about this, they will talk about cattle. Now, they didn't use the word stampede, but cattle running around confused, to describe the events with the Allies because they were in such a disarray. And another gentleman describes the Germans as he's convinced that they're doped. And I assume when he says doped, drugged, and just fanatic, because he describes their faces, their eyes, the way they look, and they just look like automatons coming at you and not stopping and just steamrolling right over you. And ironically or not, regarding this whole weather thing, though, the same snow later on, you're going to get snow. And initially, it kind of helps the Germans, but this weather's going to turn around and bite the Germans in the butt. And especially with the snow, it's only going to complicate things when it comes to roads and bridges. But yeah, so you got these crazy Germans uh, running through, and a number of other things going on, special ops stuff. A gentleman named Otto Skorzeny, and a famous gentleman who had rescued Mussolini from the jaws of danger, uh, has has a group of English-speaking Germans dressed as Americans, and they infiltrate behind the lines and change road signs and misdirect traffic and create havoc. So you got that going on, adding to the chaos. You know, it's really hard to say just how effective this stuff was, but it certainly couldn't have helped. And it definitely added to the overall chaos and confusion as the Allies tried to gauge what was going on, to what extent this was happening, because a lot of people thought, oh, it's just a little spat to, I don't know, test the lines or just let them know that they're still there. Nobody in their right mind would have thought this was the beginning of a long major offensive. Other things, you got new weapons, and glance over those real quick. You know, you got some people say that the new tanks, such as what the King Tiger and the new MP-44 Sturmgewehr, were at least part to blame for the Germans' initial success. The truth is, especially with this MP-44, even though it's lighter and more accurate and has a higher magazine capacity, which means less loading time than its counterpart, the BAR, the Browning automatic rifle. The fact is, it's just simply too few of them to really make any difference. And of course, this Sturmgewehr is the birth of the assault rifle. It is, if you look at the AK-47, it don't look too much different than this thing. And as far as the Tiger II goes, yeah, it was big and bad and mean and scared you. But, you know, it was simply unsuited for the climate. And those narrow, windy roads that snaked through the Ardennes, they create havoc on your steering mechanisms and things. And when you're constantly steering this huge ton of junk, well, not junk, but you know what I mean, left and right and left and right, most of these broke down. So during opening days, these tanks that were so going to be so heavily relied on couldn't even negotiate the roads they were on. And additionally, these things were fuel hogs, okay? And as much fuel as it took, they didn't have it. They were struggling for fuel anyway. And the only way this thing could succeed is if they captured Allied fuel dumps. And basically the whole success of the operation hinged on doing so. But, you know, even when you got fuel, most of these fuel dumps are basically the old jerry cans. And I don't know how much each can held, but not much. And when you look at the fuel capacity of one of these Tiger IIs, it takes for freaking ever to refuel them using jerry cans, you know, dumping can after can after can in the tank. And definitely not something that is conducive to fast movement and getting the job done. So these things, yeah, you can point to them and say, new technology. Well, to an extent, but really it didn't do much. And of course, no self respecting historian of the Bulge could leave out Mr. Piper. And Joachim Piper was described as charismatic, hardened veteran, loved and respected by his troops. And they looked up to him and perhaps found strength in him. But this can be a double edged sword because later in the offensive, when he's more or less trapped in L'Église and has to break out and retreat, blowing 80 tanks, 80 of them in the process because they don't have fuel for them and they don't want to leave them to the Allies. They just blow them up. When this happens, overall morale of the German offensive, as a result, suffers severely because everybody looked up to him. And like I said, kind of leaned on him. And when it was proven that he couldn't even do it, then, how can we do it? Joachim Piper himself can't break through and gain territory. How are we supposed to? So really put a dent in the morale of the Germans. And as a very important, not just a side note, but extremely important one, of course, you had the Malmedy Massacre perpetrated by units that belonged to Piper. Now, I don't believe Piper himself was involved in this, but in the town of Malmedy, reports of at least 70 Americans who had surrendered were summarily executed. But Piper was nowhere around there, and he gets lumped into that, but I don't know, incorrectly so. Nevertheless, definitely a horrible tragedy and nothing to be made light of there. But also you have on New Year's Day in 45, after receiving orders to take no prisoners, a number of American soldiers shooting approximately 60 German POWs near the Belgian village of Chinon. So you've got stuff going on both sides, and probably more so the Germans, but definitely atrocities going on both sides. And it isn't long before the offensive begins to slow. There's a number of reasons, not to mention the roads, and not to take away from the defensive abilities of the Allies by any means, especially when you consider the fierce resistance on the northern shoulder of the offensive around Elsenborn Ridge, and in the south around Bastogne, where you get the famous reply to the Germans' request to surrender as nuts. Effectively blocked German access to key roads to the northwest and west, which they counted on for success. And as a result, the columns that were supposed to advance along parallel routes found themselves on the same roads. So don't get me wrong, these were major factors, if not decisive factors, but there's a lot of other stuff going on here. And for one, the terrain really presented itself as a snag to the Germans. There are limited roads, and in fact, the whole of Piper's army has to advance along a single road through the forest. And additionally, the bridges are barely able to handle the crossing of heavy armor. I mean, these are narrow little farm bridges meant for like horses and wagons and stuff. And so where the Germans hoped to move across the valleys and the roadways, they end up moving along them. So their advance was really being dictated and constrained by the geography of the area, especially in what is known as the North Shoulder. And then you have to look at the numbers game, which initially, at least, the Germans outnumbered the Allies 3-1, okay? And this is what you want if you're going to have any hope for success in a battle. And in fact, in some spots, because the Allies are stretched so thin along this ghost front, you have a German ratio of 10-1 odds. You see, but the problem was a vast majority of these numbers consisted of Volksgrenadiers, which are made up of mostly, you hear stories of old men, and well, they were. A lot of these guys were just old men and young kids, and very green and unaccustomed to fighting, and You can look at the numbers on paper, but when it comes to fighting, they're inexperienced and definitely not what you would get when you have a hardened veteran. So there's also a sizable amount of young recruits in their teens and again inexperienced, and this might not have been so big a problem if it could have been managed with good commanders. But the German commanders were doubly handicapped in this fight. I mean, first of all, there was a lack of information, and I talked about the overall secrecy of the offensive, and Hitler kept the particulars of it so secret, in fact, and no one commander really knew the whole of the situation, and each one being only aware of a piece of the puzzle. So no one knew where precious Allied fuel dumps were, which were vital to the success of this offensive, and no one knew exactly where the enemy was. Piper, for instance, never had a clear idea where to focus his assault, which would have helped because then you could decide once and for all where to head and deal with it. What's more, where commanders were once allowed the freedom to negotiate issues as they arose, and the Germans became famous for this on their own, they were now reluctant to do so. You know, like I said before, if something came up, it was really left up to the chain of command on the field to deal with it. But now you've got people that are reluctant to do anything lest they upset Hitler, and it really presents a problem. And the whole philosophy of the Germans when it comes to tactics is you got to act. Don't sit and do nothing. Doing something, even if it's the wrong thing, is better than sitting indecisively and doing nothing. And you start getting this occurring. But ultimately, the lack of fuel in the end was perhaps most crippling to the offensive. And there are stories of tanks towing half-tracks to conserve fuel. And no one even really knew where the fuel was. And most of the dumps were being blown by the Allies. So they need fuel and they're running out. And but it was in Bastogne, I think, where the camel's back was broken. And here the Allies had been surrounded and expected to surrender, but they kept holding out. And you almost get like a little Stalingrad scenario here. Because in Stalingrad, as in Bastogne, the Germans had no real designs on these places in and of themselves, but they end up becoming, at least in the media and for the Russians and for the Allies, symbols of courage and hope. And it helps bolster morale, and the Germans start realizing this and begin to focus their efforts on Bastogne, whereas it probably shouldn't made amounted to a hill of beans. So perhaps it's easy to hold out as well regarding the people in the Allies in Bastogne. You look at them holding out, and they did so with great courage and conviction, but you got to ask yourself, would they have been able to do so, so willing to do so, in knowing that they were not going to get relieved? And of course, although everything may have seemed to be at a loss, everybody Allies-wise knew in the back of their mind that they would get help sooner or later. And that definitely plays into your ability and willingness to hold out. But either way, from here on out, and especially with the weather beginning to clear, I think you get your first day of snow roughly a week in, and it doesn't hold up. And the skies begin to clear up. And so ultimately air reconnaissance is regained, and you see groups of 36, 40 planes flying together overhead, just tons and tons and tons of planes, and they start doing their thing and knocking out tanks and just cleaning up the battlefield. And this really causes the momentum to start swinging in the Allies' favor once this stuff happens. And without fuel, their cover blown, the element of surprise is lost. The offensive has effectively stalled. It's stopped, and the gig is up. And the Germans know this, except now they're stuck in this even bigger protrusion into the Allied lines and have to figure out a way to effectively retreat, which, of course, Hitler, and at least initially, doesn't allow, but then gives in, allowing basically an inch at a time retreat almost. And of course, Patton rolls through day after Christmas, and what he wants to do, because like I said, he's still left with this giant bulge. He wants to just swing up along the front and enclose the Germans so that a giant pocket is created. And I don't know why this didn't happen. Because what ends up happening is the Allies decide no, it would be best to push back the bulge that was created and go from there. And it really makes no sense. And it all it does is cost more lives, more time, more ammo. I don't understand it. There has to be a reason why that decision was made, but it escapes me. And of course, it is with this battle that maybe perhaps more than any other of the war up to this point is really causing psychological problems, especially on the Allies side. And the military is really just learning how to deal with this sort of thing. I guess now you would call it what, post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. And of course, yeah, you had shell shock for ages before that, but this is something else, and it is really affecting a number of the troops that have been stuck in the Ardennes fighting, and yeah, it just really takes its toll, and it's some brutal stuff going on. So this was a hell of a battle, literally a hell, and in fact, I think it was my brother's grandfather, but I'm probably wrong. I should know this, but I remember family stories that come up around holidays, and one of the most memorable stories was of this gentleman who was in the war at the Battle of the Bulge, and he kind of went, well, he went nuts, literally went nuts afterwards, and apparently he had to lay in the snow as the Germans ran past for days and act like he was dead. And it really took a toll on him. And afterwards, we hear stories about him, and he would have these flashbacks, I guess, and hide under the kitchen table and shake and cry like a baby and just scream that the Germans were coming, the Germans were coming. So, I mean, this stuff, it was real, and it had a real effect, and it just really took its toll on people. So there's the basic history of it, and like I said, I didn't cover everything, and I didn't even touch on Sanvith, and but you can only go into it so much, and again, if anybody wants to know more, you have dozens and dozens and dozens of books to choose from. So when it comes to gaming the Bulge, where do you start? Because as many books as there are on the subject, there's probably almost as many games. And there's a lot of factors that go into this decision as to which Bulge game do I play. Well, there's money. If money's no object, then yeah, you can get something like a newer Wacham Rhine version, or the L2's Bitter Woods game. You can drop some nice cash on that. If you're strapped for cash, then maybe the Cells by Revolution Games is the route you want to go. And time's a factor. Again, if you don't have a lot of time, then maybe do the Cells game. If you're new to the industry, then you might want to go the Avalon Hill Axis and Allies Bulge route. Or if you like block games, then you got Fast Action Battles by GMT, which when it comes to solitaire playability, I don't think a block game should be your first choice. So there's another factor. But I'm going to stick with Ardennes 44 and make that the top recommendation. That's GMT's game. There is 2 editions of it. The second edition came out in 2012. I would recommend that, as it treats some minor map errors, handles a few adjustments there, deals with some errata, makes some game tweaks for the better. And I found my copy at game night in St. Louis. One of the few times I was able to go into a store and see a cool game. And game night has supplied me with a couple of things over the past year or two, but it seems lately they are stagnating on getting in good Wargame stock. But yeah, I saw this and it was easy to escape the eye, and had done so for a while, until I looked up at the very top shelf, which was like a restock shelf, and here this thing was, and wasn't anywhere else in the store. So grabbed that and took it home, and here's what I got, which is what I will share with you. Covers a period from December 16th to the 26th. Has 2 shorter 1-map scenarios. Covers the initial stages of the German attack. And of course, it's designed by your Mr. Mark Simonich, which is a veteran designer. And another thing, I noticed that some of these designers started out as doing the art for games, and I don't know if that happened simultaneously or if they really started out as just artists and then became designers. But I noticed on a lot of his earlier stuff, he received an artistic credit as opposed to design credit, and now it's more design credit. Anyway, he's done a number of games, including but not limited to the new France 40, which I think I'm going to give in and grab that up at some point. Normandy 44, great game. And of course, Ukraine 43, a fantastic game. And Ukraine 43 is now out of print. You'll have to go on eBay or Noble Knight or The Geek to get a copy. I highly recommend it. So at first glance, you get out the map, you're looking at it, and it's great. Just great. No complaints here at all. And no complaints with the counters either. They're functional. They don't scare the eye. They're not overly crowded with information. And then if you pull out the rule book, you got about a little over 20 pages of rules, just under a page of optional rules, which I would highly recommend be implemented. And the layout of the rules is something that lends itself to very easy digestion, nothing overly complex or confusing going on here. Anybody that has a relatively moderate experience with war games should have no problem with this thing. And then your sequence of play is as such. You got an artillery supply phase, fuel shortage phase, which happens on the German turn only and on or after turn 7. Bridge phase, movement phase, rally phase, combat phase, traffic marker phase, supply and surrender phase, victory check phase, allied turn only. And then, of course, you have some night turns, which make for interesting things. Yeah, so going through the rule book, there's a fair amount regarding bridge building and blowing. And the stacking limit for both sides is 3 points, with each point representing roughly a battalion, I believe. And British and Americans may stack and defend together, but must attack separately. Standard zone of control rules apply. Units must stop upon entering an enemy zone of control. You also have zone of control bonds, which occurs when two friendly non-artillery units are 2 hexes apart, creating a bond between them that no unit may enter or cross. Movement. Non-mechanized units may use extended movement, and any unit with a movement allowance of 2 or more may ignore all movement point cost and move up to 2 hexes. Mechanized units may use strategic movement to double their movement point allowance. And in combat, there's a 2 formation limit, which means the attacker may have a maximum of 2 different formations participate in each attack. Additionally, the attacker may use a maximum of 15 attack factors in each attack, and anything in excess gets ignored. So during combat, the attacker and defender get to use artillery support, and on or after turn 15, the allies gain air support. Combat results can include step losses, retreats, determined defense, advance after combat, breakthrough combat, and a firefight result can pop up, and this means the attacker can either accept an engaged result, which means neither retreat or advance, or he can roll again on a separate firefight table. The boundary of combat odds are you don't get any lower than 1 to 3, and you don't get any higher than 7 to 1. For defenders, instead of column shifts, you get defensive combat bonuses, which are determined by terrain and added to the hex. If you attack out of a wooded rough hex, your attack strength is halved. Your units can become disrupted or broken, and as a result must rally. And in the game, each unit is either green, veteran, or elite. The attacker gains a column shift to the right if he has a tank unit and the defender does not, or if his tank's quality number is higher than all the defending units. So each tank has a tank quality number in addition to their attack, defense, and movement factors. And you can improve positions, which basically amounts to digging foxholes and things. The defender may attempt to cancel a regular advance by using the determined defense table. Supply is checked each turn. A supply path can either be an overland portion or a road portion. And if a unit is out of supply, it suffers a column shift when attacking and may only use tactical movement. Out of supply artillery may not flip to their ready side, and an out of supply unit is eliminated if it is forced to retreat 3 or more hexes. Those that are out of supply and isolated must immediately check for surrender. Traffic markers can be used throughout the game to slow movement. These abstractly represent German commando teams, snafus, psychological disruption, which is very cool that they at least take that into account, because psychologically it was hard on these guys. And air interdiction once weather clears. Sanvith, which consists of 3 hexes, automatically has the same effects of traffic markers to represent, I guess, traffic getting bottlenecked. Special units, you've got Allied Engineer units, Vanderheit, which is Operation Stolzer, that I did not touch on and represents the failed German airdrop in the High Fens area. And they're supposed to capture a crossroads there, but ended up severely outnumbered. We've got British special units, Sturm Tigers and Broombars. Have their attack factor doubled when attacking a village, town, or city hex. You've got Kampfgruppe Piper, which has special nighttime capabilities. U.S. 2nd Division has some things. The 653rd Panzer Jager. You roll to see if they appear. There's no guarantee they show up. And finally, Dr. Sola and Panzer Brigade 150. Well, Sola was a code name for Colonel Otto Skorzeny, and may be used to infiltrate and or provide a combat shift. So he's in there. Weather, The ground conditions of turns 1 through 10 are muddy. Starting on turn 11, a cold front moves in, making off-road movement easier. Turn 1 special rules. There's about a half dozen things going on to reflect the initial surprise. Allies are limited when it comes to defensive artillery support, and no American units may use strategic movement in the first turn. So how do you determine who wins this thing? Well, the Germans win if they can accomplish one or more of the following, either exiting units or controlling certain victory hexes. And regarding that, if they can control all 4 liege hexes or all 6 victory hexes on the west map, or if they can control 4 of the 6 victory hexes along the Meuse River, they are guaranteed victory. And the Allies win if they can prevent the German player from achieving any of the above, or he can occupy 3 or more at start divisional areas for 2 consecutive victory check phases, which at least one Allied combat unit in at least in each divisional area needs to be there. These units must be in supply in each victory check phase. And you have some optional rules, which, as I have said, I highly recommend you use. Among them, the fuel dumps, and this regards hidden fuel dumps. So with this, the Allies, at the beginning of the game, randomly place 3 fuel dumps, 2 of which are dummies. So that makes for interesting stuff. And they deal with roadblocks, which can slow movement. And then there is an example of play, and the designer's notes for both the first and second editions, which make for interesting reading. So, I don't think I'd recommend this game to someone new to wargaming. I would leave that up to the Axis and Allies Bulge game. But on the other hand, the veteran wargamer shouldn't worry either. There's plenty here to consider and comprehend. Ultimately, one can digest the rules in a fair amount of time and then focus on gameplay, which is what you want, and strategy, where the game really comes to life. So overall, Ardennes 44 by GMT seems to have a fantastic balance when it comes to playability, rules mechanics, faithfulness to the historical event, overall aesthetic regarding the map and the counters, design, and even solo playability. So my recommendation is buy it, play it, and love it. And if you want to see more of it, of course, Marco Wargamer has a video review of it here on YouTube, and you're certainly welcome to take a look at it. So with that, that is the Bulge Show, and I don't know, I'm sure somewhere out there will be some group putting on a reenactment of the Battle of the Bulge, and these things are just fascinating if you can ever go to one. I've gone to a couple when I was younger. I know here in near St. Louis by Jefferson Barracks Park, they would put on reenactments, and I got to see a few of those. They stopped doing it. I know there are a number of organizations that still do it, though, and if you haven't seen one, highly recommend it, because it's thoroughly entertaining and it's history. So now, also regarding that reenactment stuff, at least with the Civil War reenactment stuff, a book you might want to read is Confederates in the Attic, and that thing is a fascinating take on the people that do this stuff, and behind the scenes things that go on with these historic reenactments. And of course, in the South, you've got a whole new, or old rather, breed of mentality who, I swear, for them the war never ended, and it is just the pause button has merely been hit. But anyway, that's an interesting read. But there you go. That is the 6th episode, which completes a 6-pack of shows. Unless I fall into a hole, I expect to have the next episode up next week, though as usual there is no guarantee of that. And if that does in fact not occur, do not panic. A show will arise at some point. And as far as the next show, what to look forward to, well, sky's the limit. Other than the usual top 10, and hopefully we will have some new things to announce regarding releases and pre-orders. And as far as the meat of the matter, that is yet to be determined, but you will see. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and as usual, keep gaming.